The Civil War was not fought over taxes. The South was not economically repressed. It's time for this bullshit narrative to end. Now, let's get into it. Taxes. There were no income taxes before the Civil War. There was no federal sales tax. There was no federal property tax. The only taxes that existed were tariffs on imported goods into the United States, the worst of which was the abominations of 1828, which put a 50% tariff on all goods coming into the United States, which is bad, but it was proposed by Southern Democrats as a ploy to try to get tariffs off the table entirely, but the North still voted for it, and it backfired. Meanwhile, the North is actually paying the majority of those taxes that you're complaining about. Now, it did have ramifications on the South in that England stopped importing as much cotton to their country, which did hurt the Southern economy. And so if they went to war in 1828, you might have had a justified excuse, but you didn't. Instead, you spent the next 3 decades taking over the government and dismantling the tariffs to the point where in 1840, $20 million was going into exports of cotton, but the tariffs were down to only 15% in 1857, which led to $80 million of increased profits. You weren't being repressed. You were having an economic field day right before the Civil War. Nobody was complaining about taxes except for the North's industrial base. You weren't the victim. You started this. Now, let's get into why tariffs existed to begin with. The only reason why they exist is for protection of industry within the United States so that industry can compete with foreign goods. Why would you make Tonka trucks and t-shirts in the United States if you could get them for cheaper in Europe, which is what was going on in the South? So when these tariffs came in, they were to protect the industry base. Now, if those Southern planters were smart at all in anything that they were doing, those slave owners had more than just 2 seconds of foresight, would have thought, oh, I could have a monopoly over everything. I can produce the cotton for free on my slave labor. I can then take that cotton and produce it into cloth at factories that I invest in the South. And then I can take that cloth and turn it into shirts and pants and tents and whatever else you wanted to do, because you could have created all those manufacturing bases all based on the backs of slaves. But you didn't, because you didn't want to invest the money. You wanted that money now. It was your money and you wanted it now. So instead, you just were happy to buy the crap from England and then sell them your damn cotton. You weren't the victims. Also, the other thing that England did to respond to these tariffs were they put their own tariffs on corn. And by corn, I mean wheat, oats, barley, any grain. And guess what? Oh, maybe that affected the poor Southern farmers, except for the fact that the vast majority of all grains that were grown in the United States at the time were grown in New York, Pennsylvania, and fucking Ohio. All of it. It was a northern problem. It's un-American that you didn't want jobs in the United States.